Why does our bone health matter so much? And I talk about this a lot, but it's because it's so incredibly important. Because nobody thinks about their bones, right? Unless we break something or end up with a diagnosis like osteopenia or osteoporosis, who thinks about their bones? It's probably one of the least thought about systems in the human body. But our skeletal system is actually one of the most critical systems in the body. And there's 4 primary reasons why. First and foremost, our physical health, our ability to move and be active, is the secret sauce to maintaining health and vitality in all other systems of the body. When we're able to move and enjoy life, our heart health, digestion, brain health, kidneys, liver, hormone balance, everything improves. And the opposite is true as well. When you kind of stop moving and start slowing down, other systems in the body start to become compromised. So physical health starts with the foundation of the body, our skeletal system. And secondly, the strength of our bone tissue determines the strength of everything that attaches to it. All of our muscles, ligaments, tendons, joint structures. In fact, our brain will never allow our muscles to become stronger than what our bones can handle. So as we age and naturally lose bone density, we have a harder time keeping our muscles and our joints strong as well. So I just want you to consider this. I like analogies. It helps people kind of understand and apply concepts to their everyday life. So I would just want you to imagine your house and imagine the foundation of your house. If you have a really strong foundation, everything is good, right? But if your house has a weak foundation or the basement starts to crumble or things kind of start to weaken, everything that's built on top of that house is compromised. Our bodies are built the exact same way. So as we age, we all naturally lose bone density. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. And that can lead to a weakening of our foundation. You can't build strong muscles, ligaments, tendons, and maintain healthy joint structures on a weak structure. So third, bone diseases such as osteoporosis are increasing at alarming rates. Today's statistics, 1 out of every 2 women and 1 out of every 4 men over the age of 50 are at risk for osteoporosis, low bone density, and will suffer a fracture. We are even seeing bone density issues and increased fracture rates in our youth. And then in addition to all of that, our bone tissue actually serves many vital functions in the body. It's so much more than just structure and support. In fact, there are 7 primary functions of bone. Bones protect our internal organs. They provide frame and shape. They enable movement. Our bones act as a mineral reserve. Our bones produce blood cells, white blood cells for immune function and red blood cells for oxygen and nutrient delivery. Our bones have a vital role in hormone regulation, and our bones actually help to detoxify the body as well. So as much neglect as our bone system is that we don't think about it, it's incredibly fascinating. So before I move on and start talking about optimal bone health and the role of food and nutrition and supplementation and all of that awesome stuff, I want to touch briefly on bone growth, development, and remodeling. Just so you have a better understanding of bone health in general, along with an overview of bone density changes as we age. It's going to tie perfectly in with nutrition and supplementation. It's easy to think of our bone as just hard, lifeless tissue in our body. A bone is actually living, growing tissue that's constantly being formed and broken down. So our bones actually remodel themselves every 7 to 10 years. It's really cool because of this process that we call remodeling, where cells called osteoclasts, which is this guy right here with the jackhammer, he's the guy that breaks down old bone and gets rid of it, and cells called osteoblasts, which are these guys right here. These guys are our builders laying down new bone, new healthy bone tissue. The bones that you have right now are not the same bones you had 7 or 10 years ago, and they're not the same bones you're gonna have in 7 to 10 years from now. And that's really cool because it gives you the possibility of improving your bone health with the right building blocks and the right physical stimulus. In healthy bones, the osteoclast and osteoblast activity is balanced. We have one guy building new bone consistently and one guy getting rid of old bone consistently.
I did.
But when this kind of remodeling becomes unbalanced, in other words, when the breaking down happens faster than the formation of new bone tissue, bones can lose density and they become thin and fragile. So let's talk briefly about how bone changes throughout our lives. So throughout childhood, the osteoblasts, our bone builders, are working really hard, and they're working a lot harder than our guys that are tearing down old bone, our osteoclasts. And there's a very steep acquisition of bone density until we reach peak bone mass at about the age of 30. So if you look here, I like these little graphics. We have two guys building new healthy bone tissue when we're young, and just one guy getting rid of the old stuff, clearing out and make way for new healthy bone tissue. And then again, about the age of 30, peak bone mass. And the bone density, so the bone density you build as a child is incredibly important. Your physical activity and proper nutrition, you end up building your bone bank, if you will. Once you reach peak bone mass at about the age of 30, ideally the remodeling process should be balanced, and it should remain balanced for a decade or two. So we have one guy building brand new bone and one guy kind of getting rid of the old bone to make way for new. The osteoblasts and the osteoclasts are working the same pace, they're in homeostasis. And then around the age of menopause for women, or about the age of 70 for men, because of the decrease in estrogen and the decrease in testosterone for men, the osteoblasts, our bone builders, typically don't keep up with the osteoclasts, or the cells that break down old bone. In fact, during the 5 years around menopause, women can actually lose as much as 25 to 30% of their bone mass. And men will continue to lose bone density at a steady but slower rate than women. But again, about the age of 70, the reduction in that testosterone can make their bone loss rapid as well. And this kind of remodeling process is happening to everyone. It's just the natural aging process that occurs. So having an understanding of how bone develops helps us understand how we can prevent bone loss, osteoporosis, and other challenges that come from a weakening skeletal structure. There are very important things that we can do to support our bone health throughout our lives, but as we get older, the key to keeping our bones strong is making sure our bone builders, our osteoblasts, are consistently triggered to stay active, keeping up with our osteoclasts. It's also vital that our bone builders are given the materials that they need, the nutrients they need, to lay down that new healthy bone tissue. So I just want to touch briefly here as well, because I think a lot of people kind of consider age-related things, age-related challenges as, you know, issues with their joints and issues with their muscles. But bone loss has always kind of been considered silent. But since we now understand that our brain will never allow our muscles or other soft tissues to become stronger than your bones, than your skeletal structure, the muscles naturally become weaker as well. So if we look at this picture, on the left, you see this bone tissue here, healthy 30-year-old bone. And here's a picture of the inside of 50-year-old bone as it starts to get a little bit thinner, the holes are a little bit bigger. So you can kind of see it's less dense, it's weaker on the inside. And when the bones get weak, the muscles also get weak. So then here is kind of some age-related issues that are tied directly to a weakening skeletal structure. You know, back and joint pain, loss of flexibility, loss of joint motion and getting stiff, change in reaction time, not being able to stop a fall, change in posture, decreasing in balance, and just a general overall. Physical activity and osteogenic loading is absolutely vital and #1 way to stimulate our workers, our osteoblasts, to lay down and create healthy new bone tissue. Proper nutrition and choosing a healthy, balanced diet is critical to supporting those osteoblast guys in assisting them to do their job. They have to have their materials to be able to lay down that healthy new bone tissue as well. And then we're also going to be discussing the role of supplementation in optimal bone health and just overall wellness. We're going to learn without the proper physical stimulus to keep those osteoblast workers going. The body simply cannot build bone from raw materials and nutrients alone, and vice versa. Just like construction, we have to have the workers and their material show up to the job to build any kind of structure. So first up, exercise. Exercise for strong bones. What actually increases bone density? We know that weight bearing and high impact exercises are best when it comes to bone health. But what does it actually take to increase bone density? Is walking enough? Do I need to be running? Do I just need to be lifting some free weights at the gym or doing yoga? That's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to start with a little bit of science lesson, and we're going to go back about a century, because we've known since about a century, over 100 years ago, based on what's called Wolff's Law, that your bones adapt to stressors or demands placed on them, similar to muscle tissue when you lift weights. When you put pressure or a compressive force, you can see this video here. Just imagine that's your thigh bone being compressed. Your bone tissue responds by remodeling and becoming stronger. And it does this to protect you. A process called osteogenesis, or new bone growth, is stimulated. Our osteoblasts, our worker guys, are triggered to get to work and start laying down new bone tissue. Just like many processes in the body, our bone responds to the environment in which it's placed. So it would be no different than when your pupils dilate or constrict to protect you against light or dark, or when you shiver or sweat to protect yourself with temperature changes. Exact same concept, it's an adaptive response. So even though we've known about Wolff's Law for over a century, it actually wasn't until 2012 that a group of researchers discovered just how much force, how much compressive force it takes to stimulate osteogenesis at a pace large enough to outpace our bone loss. So building bone density, not just slowing it down. And what they discovered was really surprising. They found that it takes 4.2 multiples of body weight of force to stimulate osteogenesis in your hip joint. So if you weigh 150 pounds, that's a minimum of 630 pounds of pressure, of consistent stimulus on that hip joint to build that bone density. So how in the world do we do this and do this safely? So what strengthens bone? Traditional exercise simply does not provide enough force. Walking and yoga and Pilates and stretching and balance exercises are all great forms of exercise, and they help with different systems in the body, but they simply will not provide enough stimulus to the bone tissue to increase bone density. So if you look here on this chart, swimming and bicycling is 0 multiples of body weight. Brisk walking is about 1 to 2 multiples of body weight. Running or jogging, we're getting up to about 3 multiples of body weight. And jumping exercises and strength training is where we start to get into that 4+ multiples of body weight. So exercise like gymnastics and powerlifting are great for building bone density, but there's obviously a really high risk of injury. That's where this concept of osteogenic loading comes in. It's the technology that we use at OsteoStrong that allows us to safely reach those types of forces, often upwards of 5 to 8 multiples of body weight, to stimulate osteogenesis naturally, to trigger those bone building cells to get to work, while kind of minimizing the risk of injury. When you focus on strengthening the foundation of the body, your bones, everything else strengthens right along with them. Posture and balance begins to improve, you become more flexible and agile, you reduce back and joint pain, you're less prone to injury, you have more energy, you're overall physically stronger. And bone tissue, because of those additional 7 functions, strengthening your bone tissue can also help with type 2 diabetes and A1C levels. So if you have type 2 diabetes, your A1C can also improve when you focus on the skeletal system. And that's what we do here at OsteoStrong all day, every day. When you combine high impact forces and osteogenic loading with positive lifestyle changes, we're going to be talking about right now, amazing things happen to your overall health and wellness.